G'day gang, it's your old pal Uncle Ghastly here again with another episode of the very poorly produced Gummy Voice show where I just don't care about production values anymore. And today we're going to, during the Babble, I'm going to tell you what it was like growing up suffering obsessive compulsive disorder, and because of the way the media portrays this disorder, I had no idea that's what I had until I eventually fell apart in my early 40s and had to put myself back together again, which was fun. Anyways, we're going to go to the table now and have some fun making bad art, because bad art is valid. All right! Take 5. It's been taking me a while to get the gummy show going tonight. Maybe that means it's a good gummy, I don't know. Anyways, what was I saying just now at the chair about bad art is valid? Why do I say that over and over again? Because that's something I have to remind myself of when it comes to my art and not anybody else's in the world. And it's because when people pay you to do a job, I always, I give her my A game. And when people pay you to make your art, I get paid to do illustrations, I get paid to make music, compose music for plays and other stuff. I get paid to act. Once you get $1 doing something, if you're like me, it might end up changing your mindset a bit about your own art, so that you start feeling like everything you do as an artist has to be bringing your A game. And that doesn't apply to this. It's equally as valid just to make bad art on purpose, just because you're having fun doing it, and just to make something without a care for the final product, just for the joy of doing it, and that's valid. And Gummy Voice tells me I should remind myself of that a little more often. So, what do we got here today? Well, we got the same setup as before, and I'm just going to record some loops on the K oscillator, and then pick some sounds to jam with it, and I might record some samples from this onto the Chaos pad and use them. So I'm just going to play around making patterns right now. And Gummy Voice reminded me to tell you what's going on. So I'm going to tell you what tempo I'm working at, because if you want to take the jam track and use it to make stuff, it's really handy to know what the BPM is. So I'm working on 60 BPM tonight is going to be our speed, because the gummy I took tonight is a 60 beat per minute type of gummy. So let's make some loops on the K oscillator duty. Okay, I played around making little loops and modifying a sound here on the thingamadoob, the Micro Freak. That's what it's called. The sound I'm editing on this is called Hollows. It's one of the factory patches. I don't know what I did to it though. So if you're trying to copy it, it's that's where you start, at Hollows. If you like this sound that I'm doing here, start at Hollows. These are the loops that I've decided on. I've got this K Oscillator Pro loop. made that out of one of the patterns and just some of the drum sounds added to it. Then I've got and that's just one of the patterns. And then this is the bass line that got kind of randomly entered into it. And then I got these chords. And then over here I got this sample. And then some other samples too. Anyways, I am just going to sort of jam out on this. And I left this in a C. The C major is the scale that this defaults to. So this way, pretty much everything I'm going to be doing, I'll try to stay on the white notes, because then if you're a musician that wants to jam along to this, but keyboards aren't really your thing, or you just haven't really, or you're just a starting musician, you just want to jam along, you should be able to play along with anything I do here as long as you stick to the white notes, I would think. I don't know. Gummy Voice isn't the best for advice on technical subjects. Anyways, let's do something with this now. Let's All right, that was a lot of fun. So I just put down 2 more stereo tracks, and it was already getting really thick and ridiculous, but I had fun doing it. And that's what's important. That's why bad art is valid. And Gummy Voice tells me this all the time, that when I'm in my off hours, when I'm not being paid to do something, I can make bad art, and just for the sake of enjoying it. And that's good, because when I've taken the gummy, I don't know if I can do good art. Anyways, we'll give my track a listen to now, and the jam track will be up, so if you want to add your own stuff, hey, go for it. It's all public domain, right? I'm giving all this away. This is my gift. And it's mostly in a pentatonic scale, so it'll be just play a pentatonic scale and the white notes, and you're laughing. Yeah, pretty much anything should go with it. It's a good thing my brain slipped into that mode tonight, I can tell you, because it's really easy to play to the old. That's why everybody loves the pentatonic scale. Anyways, let's give her a listen. Well, that was a fun jam. I had a good time. Made a lot of choices that sober me would not make, but bad art is valid, and I had fun making it. Now we get to the part which is not fun for me, which is the talking about my disorder, talking about my feelings, stuff like that. So today we're going to talk about obsessive compulsive disorder, which is what I suffer from. And I was diagnosed with it in my 40s after having a complete mental breakdown. So you're probably wondering, how the hell does someone get into their 40s without knowing they have obsessive compulsive disorder? Because you've seen movies and television shows, and it's very obvious those people have obsessive compulsive disorder. And that's because Hollywood only really focuses on what are called physical compulsions, where your compulsions are physically manifested in the world around you through your actions and what you do. So hoarding, or meticulously cleaning everything, washing your hands constantly, flicking light switches constantly. Those are physical compulsions. The type of compulsions that I and a lot of other people suffering OCD have are more mental compulsions, things I do mentally. Mantras are a common one for people with mental compulsions. They'll repeat a mantra over and over and over and over and over and over again. The counting is one I do, counting by fours, and sometimes it'll manifest itself physically if I'm particularly distressed. I do it on my fingertips like that. And some of my friends have noticed that I do that, and they recall, oh yeah, I recall you doing that before, but I didn't know until after you were diagnosed with OCD that was compulsion. I just thought it was a little thing you did. Yeah, most of my compulsions are mental compulsions. So what exactly is OCD? Well, there's two parts. There's the O, which is an obsessive thought, and there's the D, which or the C, which is the compulsion, which is something you do to exercise that obsessive thought out of your skull. Because this is what an obsessive thought feels like.
Obsessive thought, warning, 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 obsessive thought.
I'm being a little silly, but that's what it feels like. When you have an obsessive thought, it rings on the inside of your skull. It is so loud and so repulsive to you that you swear everyone around you just heard that terrible, terrible thought that entered your head. And there are different types of obsessive thoughts. There's some where it's harm to yourself. So that usually compulsions manifest themselves physically. So people who are terrified of getting sick, they constantly have thoughts of being diseased and dying and sick and coughing up their lungs and all these horrible things. And they can't stand that thought, and so they clean every surface in their house over and over and over again, because if I'm cleaning, I'm not having that thought, and I'm taking precautions, and that thought's gone, and I can control that thought and stuff. And that's basically what your compulsions are. They're you trying to control your thoughts so that you don't have that horrible obsessive thought banging around inside your head. And then there's fear of harm to others. Family members that are away and you're terrified for their safety because you're not there to protect them. So you start performing compulsions that get rid of that feeling. There's three, the type of obsessive compulsive disorder I have is called forbidden thought obsessive compulsive disorder. And what that means is you're getting a thought in your head that is way wrong. You should not have, no rational, sane human being should ever have that thought, is how it feels to you. And somehow that thought just got in your head. There are three major categories that are in the forbidden thought, obsessive thoughts. The first one is thoughts of violence. So it's, just you have a violent thought, maybe taking a baseball bat to someone's head or something in your head, and that terrifies you because it's like, I'm not a violent person. And so you start performing mental compulsions to control that thought. Another one is blasphemous thoughts, and it doesn't favor one religion or another, and even atheists get blasphemous thought obsessions, where it's for a religious person, the thought might be doing something against their religion, and it really disturbs them. And for a secular person, an atheist, they might suddenly get a thought of maybe smashing a stained glass window or disrupting a church service. And that thought horrifies them because they're like, okay, I'm not part of their faith, I don't believe what they believe, but I would never do a thing like that. And that scares them, and then they get, they perform compulsions to exercise that thought, that terrible thought they had from their head. And then the other one, which is very common, is sexual thoughts. So they could be just thoughts of committing sexual violence or having sexual violence committed against you, or they could be just thoughts of like weird stuff, and they're all unwanted, right? There's a difference between a fetish, which is something where you're like, hey, I'm kind of into that. That's pretty sexy. And then there's the obsessive thought, which is like, whoa, I am not into that. I'm just so not into that. But you can't get that thought out of your head because once it's in there, it's like, whoa. And so then you perform compulsions to get that thought out of your head. And so those having forbidden thought OCD, what that basically did to me as a kid was I had non-Gummy Voice constantly telling me what a monster I was for having a forbidden thought. And then I would perform mental compulsions because I realized if I did anything physically, I'd probably draw attention, right? and so it was better to keep everything inside my head and not tip anybody off that something was really wrong in there. And so then, yeah, I'd perform mental compulsions constantly. Anytime I was bored as a kid, my mind would end up turning inward on itself, and I'd have compulsive thoughts or obsessive thoughts, and I'd be performing mental compulsions to get rid of them. If there was something that interested me, I could use that to distract me from these terrible thoughts for a while. But if I was like in the class that I didn't really like, no, I was gone. I'd be busy performing mental compulsions that whole class, and yeah, that got me in trouble. But as a kid, I knew that there was something wrong, but I didn't know what. And because the thoughts were so terrible, I'd shun them, and I couldn't tell anyone, right? I couldn't tell anyone that I had a thought like this just pop into my head, because they'd lock me up and throw away the key, and because I'd be a monster. And so you keep it all inside yourself, and you torture yourself with compulsions to get rid of thoughts that you have no control over. And the reason you have no control over is what I learned through therapy. And basically, the way my obsessive thoughts work is the corpus callosum in my brain facilitates communication between the two hemispheres way too quickly. And as a result, some thoughts that would normally get filtered out by subconscious thought elimination processes would pick up an importance. And like I showed you with the megaphone, they would just ring out in my head as they slip past the filters that would have normally just rejected them. And this happens to everybody, believe it or not. It's not just people with obsessive compulsive disorder. It's just that when a regular person has that thought, they'll just go, well, that was a weird thought. Whereas a person with OCD like me will assign importance to that thought. That thought would not be there as strongly if it wasn't important. And the reason why it's important is because I want that thought to happen, and therefore I am a monster for having that thought. And yeah, that's a pretty torturous way to grow up, I'll tell you. And so what has Gummy Voice done for my obsessive compulsive disorder? Marijuana has done nothing at all to treat the symptoms of my disorder, which is weird because I had always hoped that it would. I had hoped that by using it, I would never have obsessive thoughts again. I hoped that by using it, I wouldn't have anxiety attacks or panic attacks, but I do. Even when I'm stoned, I will still have an anxiety attack or a panic attack, and I sure as hell still have obsessive thoughts when I'm stoned. But what Gummy Voice does is invaluable for me, because my whole life I've had non-Gummy Voice there telling me what a monster I am for having these terrible thoughts. From when I was a little kid, these terrible thoughts. And non-Gummy Voice would torture me for it. Something I had no control over. And would make me feel like the worst possible human being in the planet. What non-Gummy Voice does for me is interrupts that guy before he can even get started. And when I have a obsessive thought and I'm stoned, Gummy Voice doesn't make me run away from that thought the way I normally do by performing a compulsion of some sort to get rid of that thought. Gummy Voice makes me stand my ground against that thought, and examine it, and realize that, you know what? That's just a stupid thought. It's just a stupid thought that came into my head. There is no chance in hell I would ever act upon that thought. And this is what obsessive compulsive disorder does to the people who suffer it. It convinces them they're a sociopath. It convinces them they're a danger to everyone they're going to lose control someday and act on that violent thought that just popped into their head, unwanted and unasked for. And this thought is so uncomfortable. And the fact that this thought is uncomfortable is so uncomfortable that we torture ourselves with compulsions to get rid of this thought is proof that we are not, in fact, sociopaths just waiting for an opportunity to enact violence upon the world. That thought of violence just terrifies us. If we were sociopaths that wanted to visit violence upon the world, we'd enjoy that thought. It would be a comforting thought, thinking about, creating violence and stuff like that. So that's what non-Gummy Voice, that's what Gummy Voice does for me, is instead of running to perform compulsions as soon as I get an obsessive thought, Gummy Voice goes, look, I know that was a scary thought, but the fact that it was a scary thought just proves that that thought is not important to you, right? You got no joy out of having that thought. So let her go, Jimmy, because it was just a stupid thought. So I hope I've explained a little bit about obsessive compulsive disorder. I probably missed some things I wanted to talk about, but I hope that I've explained it a bit better so that you can understand how it is someone could go their adult life and not know that they had OCD because they don't wash their hands 100 times a day and they're not neat freaks and they don't really have that many weird things that, it's got to be a certain way, and all these things they always show you on television and in movies that people with OCD have, and you don't have that at all because your C's are mostly up here in the head, and that's where you live and that's where you torture yourself. And that's, since I was a little kid, that's how I tortured myself, thanks to non-Gummy Voice there, who would get in very quickly to weigh in on what a terrible child I was to have this thought. And I can remember the event that caused non-Gummy Voice to really cement his control over what a horrible person I was. And when I was a little kid, about 6 or 8, I was visiting my Nana, and she liked the tabloidy type newspapers like the World Weekly News and, Alien Sasquatch Baby Found. And so I had an obsessive thought that, like I said,
Obsessive thought.
and it just reverberated in my skull, and I could swear everyone heard it. And but I knew people couldn't hear the thoughts. I knew they were just inside my mind, so I thought I might be safe. And I asked my Nana, because then I had another thought that, well, what if people can read your mind and stuff? And so I asked my Nana if people can read your mind. And of course, because she likes these tabloidy type newspapers and stuff, she was like, oh yes, dear, there's these people that have extrasensory perception, ESP, and they can read your mind, and they know every little thought that's going on in there. So from that point on, it became a torture for me. And non-Gummy Voice is constantly telling me that people are reading my obsessive thoughts. And so I would perform compulsions like reciting Mary Had a Little Lamb over and over and over it in my head, so that if anybody read my thoughts, they wouldn't see the monstrous child that I was. They would just see a kid going over a nursery rhyme in their head over and over again. And so, that's what it was like, kind of growing up as a kid with OCD. And it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse over time. I literally felt like I was juggling towards the end, and that people just kept throwing more and more balls at me faster than I could keep them in the air, and it's like I knew the breakdown was coming, and it did. And the important thing is I picked myself up afterwards and got into therapy, and I was hospitalized quite a few times, and luckily they finally figured it out, what was wrong with me. And part of the problem was my fault, because when you have forbidden thought OCD, you're constantly afraid you're going to be locked up because this terrible thought was in your head. So you hide from your therapist even what's really bugging you, or you try to find a way to put it so that they don't know that you're having these terrible thoughts. And that's kind of common too, with people when they go into therapy, just not being 100% honest with their therapist. And once I started doing that, once I realized it was their job to help me and not lock me up for the rest of my life, I started being more honest. And my one therapist, she noticed a reaction I had to the meds that I was on, that someone with OCD would have at that exact dosage of that medicine, and that's when all the pieces fell into place. And so even before I got Gummy Voice, I was making a lot of progress on recovering and not going into compulsions so much. But I still had non-Gummy Voice torturing me for having obsessive thoughts in the first place. And just having him shut up for a while, that's the best thing that marijuana has done for treating my disorder. It does nothing for the symptoms at all, but it shuts that guy up for just a little while, give me a little peace. That's pretty sweet. Anyways, I've probably babbled way too long on this one. We'll think of something to talk about next week. I'll see you then. Or maybe not next week, whenever I get around to doing it. I don't have a schedule for this. I'm just doing it when I feel like it. So thank you for tuning in again.